When we left off on Friday, we had seen that the triumvirate came to power, and the three men here, Pompey, Crassus in the middle, and Julius Caesar on the right, shuffled chairs after they came to power and kept taking different positions of high influence in Rome to make sure that these three men were always in charge in some way, shape, or form. In the year 50 BC to 58 or to 48, that changes. Crassus is dead. He finally got the chance to lead an army all by himself. No chance of Pompey coming in and stealing the glory. He goes off to Parthia, and he's killed there. That same year, Pompey's wife, Julius Caesar's daughter, dies in childbirth. Julius Caesar is inconsolable. His daughter Julia seems to have been his favorite person in the world, and the fact that she's no longer alive he blames on Pompey, and so their bond is broken. At the time it happens, Julius Caesar is on his conquest of the Gauls up in what is today France, and Julius Caesar is somewhere up in this area when he gets word that his daughter has died, and he marches home. Now this march home is illegal. Pompey is afraid of what Julius Caesar is going to do, and so Pompey orders the Senate to recall Julius Caesar from Gaul, and in that recall they make sure to include the fact that he is not allowed to bring his army with him when he comes home. They can march together so far, but once they get to the Rubicon River, then they must disband. Caesar, however, has no intention of disbanding his army. The order that comes is when he gets to the Rubicon River, he must disband. I drew in the Rubicon River because it wasn't on this map. This blue line here is where the Rubicon is. It's a very thin, narrow river, not like the line I made here. But Caesar gets to the Rubicon, and he stops. He knows this next decision will decide his fate. If he crosses the Rubicon with his army, he is technically a traitor to Rome. If he crosses the Rubicon, he will be declaring war on the Roman government. So Caesar stops to try to think this through. Is this his rage, his anger, his frustration with the death of his daughter and his grandson? Is he pinning that all on Pompey? Do he and Pompey even get along? Can he stand to coexist with Pompey? He also has to be considering the fact that if the Senate has asked him to come without an army into Rome, somewhere in the back of his head has to be a feeling of impending doom. We've seen many politicians murdered in Roman history for political purposes and for things much smaller than what Julius Caesar is doing. He knows how much the Roman people love him. He knows how much the Roman power fears him. He hesitates. He negotiates. He fears assassination. He pauses. But, just like his uncle Marius, he decides this is war, and it's a war he thinks he can win. It's recorded by Caesar that when he paused at the river, he reflected on all this, and then he said, let the die be cast. I'm going to roll the dice. I'm going to cross the river. I'm declaring war. Whatever happens, happens. What happened became known as the Caesarian Civil War. It's the second major civil war in Roman history, the first one being Marius and Sulla. Pompey hears that Julius Caesar has crossed the Rubicon and he is on his way to Rome, and these events again occur in 50 BC. And so Pompey and the senators who are loyal to him, upon hearing that Julius Caesar is coming, they take off to Greece. That's this green line here. They know that Julius Caesar has more loyalty from the army and the common people. Pompey, while he is popular with his soldiers, is not necessarily popular with all of the soldiers in Rome. Caesar comes in, marches into Rome, finds all of his enemies gone, and announces that unlike previous situations in Roman history, he will not be brutal and violent, so he declares that there should be no purge. But he also tells his enemies they should leave. You can't stay here. I'm not going to kill you right now, but if you happen to stay a while, I may change my mind. So most of them do. There's a story of a young tribune. This is a member of the assemblies, not in the Senate, a lower ranking power structure in the assemblies. The tribunes had control of the money in Rome, and Julius Caesar takes over the treasury himself. He dictates how money is going to be spent. He demands a large sum of money to cover his expenses for this civil war. And this young tribune steps in and says, no, that's inappropriate spending of money. There's been no vote. We decide how the money is spent. And Julius Caesar tells this young man, quote, young man, if you don't stop interfering, I may just kill you. And I dislike saying this much more than I will dislike doing it. In other words, give me the money or I'm going to kill you, and trust me, it won't bother me at all to kill you. I don't like saying I'm going to kill you, but I won't dislike actually murdering you. So fighting goes on for 2 years. Julius Caesar is now basically a supreme dictator in Rome. Nobody challenges him. Nobody questions him. This young tribune just kind of disappears from the pages of history. We know he went back to his house in great fear, probably as white as his toga, and he's never seen or heard from again on the pages of history anyway. So from 50 to 48 BC, this 2 years of war, Caesar is a master of the infantry soldiers. Pompey is a master of the cavalry soldiers. They meet in Pharsalus, which is in Greece, and Caesar routs Pompey. It's not even close. It's a huge victory for Julius Caesar. In the middle of the battle, Pompey realizes this is going downhill quickly. He tries to disguise himself, and he does, and he flees the battlefield. Caesar, back in Rome, is appointed dictator for 11 days. Then he is appointed consul, which is not the legal process for doing this sort of thing. He hears that Pompey has fled Greece and gone to Egypt. So Julius Caesar decides he's going to pursue him down to Egypt. The young man ruling Egypt at the time is Ptolemy IV. He is from that dynasty that has gone on now about 300 years since the breakup of Alexander the Great's empire. The general Ptolemy took the Egyptian part of Alexander's empire and had been passed down through his family. The Ptolemies were pharaohs in Egypt. Ptolemy the sixth is Ptolemy the Sixth is the one who is leading Egypt when Julius Caesar comes down. He has a sister who is also his wife, because that's the way things are done in Egypt. Her name is Cleopatra. So Julius Caesar comes down to try to track Pompey into Egypt. Ptolemy and Cleopatra are in a little bit of a power struggle while this is going on. Ptolemy views himself as the proper and legitimate king who should be making all the decisions. Cleopatra does not like the decisions he makes, and she is a very strong, powerful woman, and she says that she should be in charge. So the two are arguing. Ptolemy VI is looking for some kind of leg up in this power struggle. And so he decides that if he can get Julius Caesar on his side, that will solve once and for all the question of who's really in charge of Egypt. Julius Caesar, meanwhile, has been plotting all along, according to the sources, that he is going to be looking for a way to finally bring Egypt into the Roman Republic, which would then give Julius Caesar everything on this map. Ptolemy hears that Caesar is coming. Pompey comes down the Nile, gets off the boat. Ptolemy orders his guards to bring Ptolemy to him. He sends a letter saying that he is going to offer Ptolemy asylum, which means political safety in Egypt. Pompey is fantastically thrilled about this. He maybe is thinking, we don't know, but maybe he's thinking that with his army and the Egyptian army, he can take back Rome. But he's excited at least for the opportunity to partner with Ptolemy, and certainly excited at the opportunity that he'll be able to stay alive, at least if Ptolemy lives up to his end of the bargain. Unfortunately, Ptolemy does not live up to his end of the bargain. He had no intention of letting Pompey live. As soon as Pompey steps off the boat and gets onto the dock of the Nile, Ptolemy's guards stab him, kill him, behead him, and send the head of Pompey in a basket to Julius Caesar. Julius Caesar says he had no intention of killing Pompey. He wanted to track him down, bring him back as a prisoner of war. They're old friends. It's his father-in-law / son-in-law, all that weirdness that's in this family tree. Caesar says he has no intention of ever hurting Pompey. So he declares that Egypt is now part of Rome, and that's the punishment that the Egyptians must suffer for killing such a noble Roman. He orders that Ptolemy and Cleopatra come to Alexandria. They are not there currently. That's not where their capital is, but that's where Julius Caesar is. And the reason Julius Caesar is in Alexandria is that at this point in history, it is still known where Alexander the Great is buried. His body is supposedly in Alexandria, and Julius Caesar has always been a great admirer of Alexander the Great, so he sets up camp in Alexandria. He makes a pilgrimage to the tomb of Alexander the Great, and then he orders the king of the pharaoh and his sister to come so that he can decide which of them will be in charge. Unfortunately for Ptolemy, Julius Caesar sees Cleopatra. Cleopatra is often described as one of the most beautiful women that has ever lived. She's young at this point. She's very beautiful. And Julius Caesar notices those two things right away, and he falls immediately and madly in love with Cleopatra. He has a negotiation session with Ptolemy. Why should you be in charge? He has some sort of session with Cleopatra. We don't know exactly what happened in that meeting between Julius Caesar and Cleopatra, but he comes out of that meeting and says that Cleopatra is now in charge of Egypt, and Ptolemy, you have to question what Ptolemy was thinking here. Ptolemy's response to this is to try to kill Julius Caesar with all of his armed guards in his room. So Ptolemy tries to kill Caesar, and Ptolemy himself is killed fighting against this decision. Caesar stays in Egypt for some amount of time. It is long enough that he and Cleopatra have several more meetings, and we don't know what happens in those meetings, but we do know that about 9 months after those meetings, Cleopatra gave birth to a son who was named Ptolemy Caesarian, the family name Ptolemy, and Caesarian meaning the son of. The Civil War is over. Julius Caesar is now leading a Rome that is the largest empire the world has ever seen.